welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with the program. Let's shift gears to lifestyle now, and I want us to talk about one of lifestyle diseases. Is it lifestyle, or let's just say health? The silent threat of thyroid disorders. We're going to find out in a few if it's a lifestyle disease or not. But this is something that doctors are reporting a steady rise in, and particularly among women. But what's driving the rise in thyroid diseases in the country, and what does this mean to us as Kenyans as of 2025? And helping with this conversation is John Deity, the General Manager for Kenya and Nigeria at Mark KGAA. This is a company that has been instrumental in driving the Thyroid Africa campaign, an initiative aimed at raising awareness about thyroid health across the continent. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne.
Karibu sana to Morning Cafe.
Thank you, and a pleasure for having me today.
What is that KGAA in Mark KGAA?
These are abbreviations of differentiating Mark, which I work for, from another company in the US which shares the same name. So in the US they are called Mark, outside the US they are called MSD. In the US we are known as EMD, Emmanuel Mark Darmstadt, and outside the US we are called Mark because we are the originator of the name Mark. And this organization is the oldest pharma company. It's over 300 years old.
Amazing.
So basically just to differentiate. Yes.
So is thyroid disease a lifestyle disease, as I'd mentioned before?
I would call it a non-communicable disease. It's caused by autoimmune diseases. So you can either have hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. And from the names you can see, one is underacting of the gland, and the other one is overacting of the gland. So if it's overacting, then you have hyper. If it's underacting, then you have hypo. Yes.
When you say overacting and underacting, how do we differentiate them exactly? What do they present, and how do they present themselves?
So, and this is a gland that is on the front of the neck. It's butterfly-like. And this gland produces hormones, which are responsible for metabolism in the body. So when you have hyperthyroidism, it means it's overacting. And so you have accelerated heartbeats. You are a little bit irritant. You're sweating a lot. And you lose weight quite fast. So it's overacting. If it's underacting, then it's mostly the opposite, where you find that you're gaining weight, you have consistent fatigue, you have a dry skin. So yeah, it's mainly the opposite of the other. Basically what it means when you have thyroidism, it means you have thyroid disorder. Yes.
And for a very long time we've heard more about goiter. So how different is thyroid from now goiter in itself? Because if you're talking about thyroid being a butterfly-like thing, but goiter, we know sometimes it comes with a lot of swelling. So how different are they?
They're pretty different, Anne. And well, at the end of the day, it's a question of the diagnosis. As I said, this is the gland, and for example, thyroidism, you're not able to see it, right? So you may not be able to see whether you have thyroidism or not. For goiter, you'll be able to see because of the swelling, right? It presents itself like that. For you to know whether you have a thyroidism, you do a test, right? And it's called a TSH test, right? Where you look at what we call T3 and T4, right? And if it's positive from the test, then you have thyroidism. That's how you know. For goiter, you're able to actually pick from the symptoms in terms of the swelling, and then you can tell something is wrong with that person. So maybe to just throw in something, as you started, you said this is a silent threat. And it's because you may not be able to see it from you and I, right? Because you will probably not be able to see the dry skin so much. When someone is restless, you may not know. The weight gain or weight loss, you may not tell it's because of thyroidism. So that's why it's silent. So how do we work on this? It's one, you create awareness, all right? Because we do have a population of 56 million people. The prevalence is about 4%, which brings it to about 2.2 million people. So we have over 2 million people that are living with thyroidism in the country.
Currently.
And they don't know, yes. So
those who don't know are 2.2 million.
we have 2 million people that are living with it. Some of them know, which is a small chunk, about 10%, which is about 200,000 people, which means we have about 2 million people that are living with thyroidism and they do not know. Okay, so that's why, as Mark, we've said we need to look at 3 pillars. Pillar number 1 is to create awareness, okay, through traditional media, which is where we are, and through social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, for people to be aware that there is this disease and we are living with it. After they're aware, what happens is we have a call to action where we've asked them, go and see a doctor, go and see a clinician next to you. We need to upskill the doctors so that when they spot these symptoms, it clicks, oh, this patient might be living with thyroidism. And then the doctor will be able to send them for a test, which is just what I mentioned, the TSH test or the full profile test, which is TFT. And that is now the 3rd pillar. So pillar number 1, awareness. Pillar number 2, upskilling the doctors so they can spot the symptoms. And pillar number 3 is to partner with entities, chain of labs and hospitals that can do these tests. One of the prohibitions, Anne, is a big chunk of this population lives in the bottom of the pyramid, which we call mashinani. And the cost of test is really a differentiator. Treatment will probably cost you $10 for the whole year. The test sometimes is more expensive than a whole year of treatment for this disease. So you see, the issue is not the solution. The solutions are there, the treatments are there, they're registered and they're there. The challenge is diagnosing, to know that someone actually has the condition so that they can go for the treatment.
And we'll be getting into diagnosis and treatment, of course, as we progress with this conversation.
Yes.
But I want you to address the issue of signs and symptoms as we go ahead.
Yes.
It's a silent disease.
Yes.
It's not seen and prominent as goiter is.
Yes.
Then what are the signs and symptoms to look out for when somebody, you know, apart from, of course, the weight gain, and the weight loss?
Yes.
So what can we look out for?
Consistent fatigue, right? So you've rested, you feel like you've had enough sleep, but then you're consistently feeling fatigued. As I said, skin dryness, right? So this is for hypothyroidism, right? So if you're consistently feeling fatigued, because again, this is the other thing, and if you're fatigued, then you will not work optimally. You will not function optimally. You will not be productive, right? So if your skin is dry, you have this sudden weight gain, you're consistently feeling fatigued, you could be having hypothyroidism. So what are we encouraging? We are encouraging, please go and see a clinician. Please go and see a doctor, right? So this is for the general population. But we are also talking to employers. We are talking to health authorities. We are talking to the government. And what we are saying is, if you're an employer, it's cheaper and easier for you to arrest a condition at the early stage, early diagnosis. As a society, we have this habit of reacting to things instead of being proactive. Health is yours and yours for the community. And today, if you're unhealthy, if you have a condition, what that does is, first of all, it limits you from being productive, as I said. If you're unhealthy, you would not be here this morning, right?
Right.
So you're taking away your source of income, you're not productive, and at some point, you become a burden to the society. So health is very key, and it's number 1. So if we can proactively look at this issue, where we go for maybe annual tests, as individuals, we have a lot of camps that happen in churches, in schools, you know, and in social gatherings. Let's leverage on them. Let's take advantage of them. That's one. As an employee, some people have medical insurance covers. Walk into health centers, get tested, right? Arrest a condition early in advance. And once it's arrested, as I said, solutions are there. It significantly improves your quality of life. Productivity, a good quality of life starts with me and you.
Right. And let's address the causes
Yes.
in broader length, because goiter is something that we know more about, and I want to draw comparison from that.
Yes.
With goiter, we know that it's associated with iron deficiency, but how about thyroid? This is a silent disease.
Yes.
Then how do we know what causes it exactly?
Good question, Anne. So hypothyroidism is both hyper and hypo are autoimmune diseases, which means the body, attacking itself. So in this case, for hypothyroidism, it's caused by a disease called Hashimoto, and for hyperthyroidism is called by a disease called Graves syndrome. So both are autoimmune diseases, which means the body attacks itself. So they attack the gland, or the thyroid gland. And so that's what makes it either over or under perform. Yes.
All right. And the question now will be, how dangerous is thyroid exactly? Because if we say, sometimes somebody will not actually realize that they have thyroid disease.
Yes.
Then how dangerous is it to somebody if it's not identified early? Because we have a challenge in diagnosis as well. You've mentioned about that. Then how dangerous is a prolonged untested thyroid in the body?
A very good question. So if not treated and managed, of course, it has continuous damage on the body organs, right? Because, as I said, this is the gland that produces hormones that are responsible for metabolism, right? And so if not checked, then it means the disorder is affecting other organs in the body. And in the long term, then it leads to what we call comorbidities, or other, organs in the body being affected. Yes. For the young children, it causes stunting. For pregnant mothers, it also has other side effects on the baby, on the birth of the baby, congenital birth. So yes, if not treated, first of all, to start with, is your quality of life is not good, but then in the long term it affects the other organs of the body. Yes.
You've mentioned something about babies, and now I would like to know the age bracket that is most affected with thyroid. What is it?
Well, again, there's no age bracket. It affects
anyone,
right? Because it's an autoimmune disease and it has no age gap. Yes.
And I was reading somewhere that women are disproportionately affected with thyroid. Then why are we the most at risk as women?
Well, again, so if I take a step back, and from a local perspective, yes, this is the conversation, right? And we do have a lot of studies that have been done outside African population. We are in the process of collecting data. We do not have a lot of data, so I cannot with authority tell you that this is a population that is highly affected, this is not highly affected. That's the reason why, as a silent threat, we are suffering. Over 2 million people have it, but we do not have data. It's important for us, moving forward, one, to talk about it, to create awareness, two, to upskill the doctors, three, to partner with the institutions and collect data, so that in a few years, we can with authority say, it's the women, it's the children, it's this kind of population that is actually affected.
Would you attribute that to the poor health-seeking behavior, especially from men? Because I know the NDCCC issued a report last year and said that, men have poor health-seeking behaviors when looking at, other diseases, especially HIV. Then would you attribute that to that particular habit, especially from the men? Because now the report is out there, they're saying that women, as it stands, are disproportionately affected. You talked about we don't know much about men, we don't know much about children. Do we say it's because of the poor health-seeking behavior?
Look, I don't want to attribute it to men only. I want to attribute it to the general society. And when we look at the African population, we are very proactive, and I think I mentioned that. We are very reactive, sorry, and I think I mentioned that when we started. Rarely do we go for tests, right? And that's why we are having this conversation. Because if you look at as you mentioned, HIV. A lot of people had stigma. But then prominent people, influencers in the society, leaders that we respect, came out and said, guys, this is a disease we are living with, and we need to find a way of talking about it, have a discussion. And look, we've had measures, we've had infrastructures. Same happens to cancer, right? Same happens to diabetes and heart disease. Thyroidism is a disease that we are living with, not lifestyle, non-communicable, autoimmune. Okay, but nonetheless has effects on ourselves and the society. So not just for the men or women or children, because of course when we look at women and children, we really need to take care of them, right? They are the backbone of the society, right? But equally across all population ages, age and gender, we need to have this culture of proactively looking after our health, both lifestyle, right, which is mainly non-communicable, and also the infectious disease, right, on how to be able to manage ourselves, not to spread infections. So to answer your question in many words, Anne, it's a behavior change that as leaders, and I think you as media house, you're doing that in a good way. We need to encourage people. It's cheaper to prevent than to treat. It's cheaper to test early and intervene early than to treat later and intervene later. Yes.
And we started by saying that there is a steady rise in the number of thyroid cases in the country.
Yes.
But what would you say is contributing to the rise in thyroid cases in the country? This is not something that we used to talk about much.
Yes.
It's a conversation that has just started recently.
Yes.
Then what are we doing differently that is now contributing to the rise in thyroid?
Thank you. So look, I wouldn't say there's a rise. I would say there's awareness.
Okay.
The disease has been there. We've been living with it. It's just that a big chunk of the population was not aware that they are living with this disease. In April this year, we started the Thyroid Africa campaign. Across Sub-Saharan Africa, we've reached about 12 million people, right? And we've asked them to go for tests, to go see clinicians, physicians and endocrinologists. And I believe that's part of the reason why now the numbers are up. Yeah, it's not that the disease wasn't there. It's been there, right? But now people are going for tests and realizing, oh, I've been living with thyroidism. Is this a good thing? I would say it is, because it's better to know that you're living with a disease than to ignore, and then the effects are much worse. Okay, so once tested and you know you're living with it, what happens? There is intervention, and you said we'll talk about it later.
Absolutely. So are we embracing these conversations as a community? Because as Mark Foundation, you're saying you're going community to community, especially those that, for example, in far-flung areas, you're reaching to them. Then are we embracing these conversations around thyroid as it stands?
That's a very good question. And maybe I would want to throw it out there to the audience, whether this is being embraced. From the feedback that you just shared, that the cases are now increasing, it's not them increasing, it's just that now people are aware, they're going for tests, and they realize they're living with it. I would say that's a positive sign. Okay. But then I would switch it the other way around and say, look, as communities, we prioritize what we see and what we hear. A few years ago, as I gave an example, when somebody had cancer in the community, people would call them, funny diseases, right? But now when people went into diagnosis and awareness and treatment, they're aware, oh, this is actually a disease, right? This is not what I was calling it. Same thing with thyroidism, right? So the more people hear about it, the more people go and talk to the clinicians about it, the more knowledge they get, and the more acceptance it gains, the stigma goes.
So what are the myths and misconceptions that you're hearing about thyroid when you engage with the communities and talk to them about thyroid? Because, as I said, GOtv is what we've been talking much about in this country. Thyroid is gaining momentum, and that is very great work. But what are the myths and misconceptions that you hear around thyroid?
Very good question, Anne. We haven't yet reached that big community level. We've started from the, I would say, urban centers, because our arm started, in the awareness campaign with social media, which is very highly embraced in the metropolis, right? So in the big cities, in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Luanda, Angola, because we are doing it across sub-Saharan Africa. We've seen a lot of people embracing it. It's metropolis, so little myths, right? The next level is what we are doing, traditional media, right? Talking to you. You're an influencer. A lot of people follow you. A lot of people watch you. And so you're creating that awareness. The next level is now the community health workers. And I would probably want to pause there and say, I want to appreciate what the government has done with the community health workers. In the beginning of this regime, the government went out and recruited a big number of community health workers and gave them devices to be able to collect data on the population. This is a good step on, because basically what happens is these community health workers, they are going around into homesteads collecting data on healthcare or about the population. So what happens is, this is a good start. The end game is this data can now be used to proactively intervene on healthcare underlying conditions. So the government will know we have this number of people that are living with diabetes, with thyroidism, with cardiovascular diseases. And so the government will proactively mobilize resources towards that area. So to answer your question in many words, this is the next step in terms of working with the community health workers, also requesting the government to support, because, and I don't speak for the government, but I would want to assume we have a lot of things we need to prioritize, but then the resources are minimal. So what is being spoken about, what the community is making noise about, is what the government will most probably prioritize. And in this case, what we are asking is, can we also prioritize thyroid disease and have tests accessible to people in the mashinani? Because the solutions are there. But unless you know you're living with it, then the intervention will not happen.
The CHPs are there, of course, in communities, especially in Taflang, across the country.
Yes.
But are they well trained to identify, any, say, strains of thyroid disease in the body? Because as they collect data of the population, say nowadays they're testing for breast cancer, cervical cancer. When you talk about thyroid disease, are they well trained to identify a thyroid condition?
Okay, and to be very honest, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question on whether they are well trained.
But you have faith in the CHPs to do that job?
Look, as I said, I think the government has done a good job to first of all have them, okay? Because at that first level, where they have contact with the society, one is they are healthcare promoters, so they have basic knowledge on healthcare. All right. And so they have what they are trained to do. And if they're not able to pick up something, or they're not able to diagnose something or identify something, then they have a pathway of referring that patient. So it's actually a good thing, because sometimes what happens is you have a healthcare challenge, you do not even know where to start. But if you know where to start, then the rest becomes easier, because it's a question of referral. So yes, I do have faith in them, in that if they're not able to spot the symptoms from a thyroid perspective, then they have a path towards which they can be able to refer, and then these patients will get support. Yes.
What gaps are you seeing when we talk about thyroid disease and awareness creation and addressing this particular challenge here?
Yes.
What do you think is hindering all that is needed to just bring thyroid to light?
I would say, again, it's awareness. We have, in sub-Saharan Africa, we have a population of almost 800 million people, right? With our awareness campaign, we've only reached 12 million so far. And this started in April up to now. This is a small chunk of people. For us to be able to reach these 800 million people, then it takes bigger resources. It takes, augmentation of both national, local government, and the community to be able to create this awareness. So the momentum has started, the conversation has started, but we are still scratching the surface. We have a long way to go. So the biggest gap is, can we continue the momentum on this conversation. Yes.
And a question that I know a viewer might be wondering this morning, we talk about the signs, the causes, we've talked about early diagnosis.
Yes.
We know with cancer, for example, they say that early diagnosis helps with treatment and potentially just shrinking the tumors that might be existing. But how about thyroid?
Yes.
Ali, is this a curable disease? It's a non-communicable disease, yes, but is this something that once discovered in the body can be entirely cured?
It can be reversed. I wouldn't talk about cure and uncure. I would talk about it can be reversed. If arrested early, it can be reversed, all right? At some point, then it might be reversible and you might have to live with it. So yes, it's a question of reversing or non-reversing. Yes.
So it means that once treatment has begun, it's something that continues for a lifetime?
At a certain stage, because again, as I said, it's autoimmune, the body attacking the thyroid gland. It depends on the magnitude of the attack, right? If arrested early, it could be reversed. Maybe at an advanced stage, the patient might have to live with it. Yes.
Let's now talk about the issue of diagnosis, which of course we've mentioned it's a challenge in Kenya. So what are the barriers to diagnosis when we're talking about thyroid disease?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, because this is our third pillar, Anne, that we are also working with partners to be able to have accessibility. When you look at the society, we have, I would say, 3 echelons. So we have the top echelon, which is a very small percentage. We have the middle of the pyramid, which is you and I. And then we have bottom of the pyramid. And this is the biggest population. A big chunk of people living with thyroidism are actually in the bottom of the pyramid. What is their biggest challenge? Their biggest challenge is affordability to access the diagnosis. As I mentioned when we started, the treatment is about $10 for a whole year. But then the diagnosis is between $10 to $25. So you see, just to test.
How much is that in Kenyan shillings?
So $10 is about what? The dollar is 127, about 1,270. So if you round it up, 1,300. So it could go between 1,300 to about 3,500, right? That's the cost of the test. And the treatment for a full year is 1,300. So the biggest gap is one, as I said, information and awareness. And pillar number 3, access to the testing. The prohibitive cost is a big hindrance to the population, especially in the mashinani areas. So what are we doing? As an organization, we are partnering with some of the lab chains, right? So we've had a conversation with Seba Lancet, and they've been willing to come down in terms of the cost of thyroid test. We are also in conversations with Dr. Kalebi's labs, DKL, and another third lab called Metropolis. So we've had conversations and they said, okay, we can reduce the cost of testing because we need a bigger population to have access to this testing. But again, this will not take care of a big chunk of population. So what we've also done is we've come down to what we call social entrepreneurs. So we have these healthcare entities that work in the bottom of the pyramid. If allowed, I can mention one. It's called Access Afia. So we are partnering with Access Afia and an equipment that sells these testing kits, but they will not sell to them. They will place, and then the guys will buy the reagents. And they're willing to half the price, maybe from $10 to about $5, $6. And when this is actioned, then it means the access of bigger population to test will increase. So we have Access Afia. We are in conversation with Penda Health. They currently have about 17 clinics across the country. But the ultimate solution, Anne, will be to work with government hospitals. We have all types of levels of government hospitals across the country. If the government comes to the table and we are able to have this testing happening across, especially to the mother and child, right? This would really help in terms of access, and this would really help in terms of diagnosis. Yes.
You mentioned something about the THS, that is the diagnosis that being done with thyroid, T3 and T4. But when you're looking at it in terms of healthcare infrastructure in this country, how available are these now thyroid function tests, such as this THS, T3 and T4?
Yeah.
How accessible are they in public hospitals across Nairobi? You've mentioned about private hospitals who are willing, of course, to bring that cost down. But how available are these in the public hospitals?
So again, and maybe just to say, I cannot speak for the government. So in terms of availability in the public sector or not. But the fact that, as you said, the awareness is low, that means the tests is low, right? So the conversation that I would want to put on the table is to request that these tests are made available even in the public hospitals. And this is a conversation I said, ultimately, this would be the solution, right? Where, and I know, again, as I said, the government needs to prioritize because there are many priorities and limited resources. But if this can be one of the areas of priority, that would be a good conversation with the government, where in the public sector, we can have this test. I know in the private institutions, we do them. I know in some of the key labs, we do have them, and social businesses. But in the public sector, if this could be made available, then that would really be a game changer.
So talk to us about some of the challenges that you see, of course, these patients that have been diagnosed with thyroid undergoing. And I want to see how you, as an organization, you're trying to bridge that gap with these patients. We're talking about the importance of creating awareness, the importance of early testing. But now, what are these challenges that the patients are, undergoing?
So look, I would say, and once someone has been diagnosed, right, and they are found to have thyroidism, the solutions are there in terms of the treatment. And from the Non-Communicable Disease Association of Kenya, NCDAK, we are working closely with them, and we've had testimonials of patients who previously lived with thyroidism and they did not know. And when they were diagnosed, the intervention happened, and the quality of life has significantly changed. So we've seen both ends, but although on a smaller scale. So what I would say and here is the challenge is the patient actually knowing the reason why I'm having these symptoms is because I'm living with thyroidism, and the only way to do that is to visit a clinician when you have the symptoms, because if you're of good health, then you don't have symptoms. If you do have symptoms and your quality of life is not good, it's important to see a clinician. It's important to go for the test, and the intervention will be done. Yes.
From where you sit and as a foundation, have you identified, if at all, we have a reliable supply chain for thyroid medication across the country? Once it is diagnosed, you have thyroid, then do we have, the medication to actually treat this, and just maybe even for reversing? Because you mentioned this is something that we can reverse and not treat.
Very good question, Anne. Do we have intervention in terms of medication? Yes, we do. The main molecule is called levothyroxine, and yes, it is readily available. We do have several brands that are registered in Kenya. So yes, to answer your question in many words, the medication is there. I think, again, the Healthcare Authority, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, has done a good job in terms of registering these solutions. They are readily available in most of the healthcare institutions in the country. And so once someone has been diagnosed, the drugs are there to be able to treat these patients. Yes.
If diagnosis is expensive, treatment is expensive, then what is the cost of medication?
Well, no, treatment is not very expensive. The biggest barrier we actually have is diagnosis.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned, a full year's treatment for thyroidism is equivalent to a single diagnosis. So a full year treatment is approximately $10. And as I said, on the lower end, the test is $10. So you see the test is equivalent to a full year's treatment. So the issue here is not the medication. The issue here, in my opinion, is the testing. Yes.
So by any chance you've not had any patients who have defaulted from medication, maybe because of cost, or you know, we're looking at this from a point of privilege for others.
Yes,
because not everybody can achieve medication.
Yes.
If, say, mboga for some people is a challenge, mboga
Yes.
can be 10 shillings, but say a family of, say, 7.
Yes.
We understand how health can, you know, bring people back and financially. But if you're looking at this as something that you're going to take medication daily, have you had cases where patients have now backtracked and dropped from taking medication?
Of course, yes, Anne. Look, affordability, especially in the bottom of the pyramid, sometimes is a challenge. And that patient who is taking levothyroxine sometimes might need to make a choice between buying a meal or having the medication. And of course, they will probably choose buying the meal. Okay. And so that leads to the next level in terms of having what we call access programs, where we have subsidized costs of medication. Merck, and by the way, just to clarify, we do have Merck Foundation, which is a totally different arm in terms of what they do, and then the Merck Biopharma, which is the commercial entity that I represent. So as an entity, the Merck Biopharma team, what we are trying to do is to create accessibility to some of these medication that is required by the patient. And this is by doing what we call giving an access price, where the product comes in to the patient at an affordable cost, so that, you know, from the bottom of the pyramid, the patient is able to afford this drug. So yes, to answer your question in many words, we do have some patients who, for some reason, in terms of affordability, have not been able to buy this drug. But then with the supply chain networks, we are working on access pricing so that the patients can get them affordably. Yes.
So what will that do to the health of somebody with thyroid if they slow down on that medication or choose food over medication? What does that do to the health?
Of course, the symptoms come back. Yeah.
Worse?
Yeah. Yes. Because the disease is progressing if you're not managing it as you should, right? So the important thing is to make sure the patients that already are on medication do not default, right? They have consistent supply of medication, which brings the topic of NCDA Alliance of Kenya, right? Being able to consistently keep in touch with these patients. And they've done an excellent job as a community, right, to be able to support each other, whereby someone is able to speak out and say, hey, look, I am down, I'm not able to, because mainly they will buy medication for a month, on a monthly basis. They are able to speak to each other and say, hey, look, I'm not able to have medication for the next month, right? And they are able to get support.
All right. And as a country, and of course, in terms of the health sector, we have made significant strides with communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, just to mention a few. But you're talking about, as at Merck, you want this conversation, that thyroid to be included as an NCD.
Yes.
Then how does it fit in the broader NCD conversation?
Look, you've answered it properly. We are progressing in terms of managing the non-communicable diseases. I think it started with cancer, right? And there is quite a wide discussion on cancer. There's been quite a vibrant conversation on diabetes, which is a lifestyle disease, cardiovascular disease. I think these three areas, there's been quite a momentum in terms of the conversation. So what happens is, the broader the conversation, the more conditions we are able to include in these programs, then the healthier the society, the better the quality of life for the society. And it's all about productivity. It's all about optimized productivity, quality of life for the people. If it's a healthy population, then what happens? The productivity goes high and it becomes a wealthy population. Yes.
Is there any challenge that you're currently experiencing in regards to just trying to incorporate thyroid as an NCD?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I would say the conversation has just started. And what happens is, on most cases in the emerging markets, the corporate or the private arm will start conversations, and then they will be brought into the table for the government, and then it becomes a public conversation. So that's why, as an organization, we've taken this first step to say, hey, this is a disease, we are living with it, it's affecting over 2 million people in this country. We need to have a conversation about it. This is what we are doing. We are creating awareness. We are upskilling the healthcare professionals, right? We are trying to partner with some labs and hospitals to bring about diagnosis, right? This is a private international organizations, but we are not able to reach the masses. Can we come on the table and have a broader conversation? Yes.
All right, and I know the health system is already stretched a bit with, when you're talking about communicable diseases, we have, like I've mentioned, diabetes, hypertension, just being a few of them. But how realistic is it to prioritize thyroid now as an NDC, being that there's already limited resources when you're talking about matters healthcare?
Well, and maybe just to throw in an economic word, scarcity brings choice, leads to choice, right? So we will always have limited resources. I don't think there is a point where we will have more resources than the needs. The needs will always be more than the resources. So it's a question of prioritizing. But, and again, just to say, I don't speak for the government, but I want to applaud what the government is doing in terms of the community health promoters and the community health workers because of collecting data. It's a question of proactively managing disease burdens and conditions. And the only way we can do that is when we allocate resources based on data. Right now, we don't have data, right? If you look at the modernized countries, the first world countries, they have data. And because of that, they are able to prioritize resources. We are heading there. And I think the government is doing a good job in collecting this data. The end game is everything will be put on the table, and the government will be able to say, hey, this is the prevalence on cancer, on diabetes, on heart disease, on thyroidism. This is the prevalence. Okay. So these are the resources that we will be able to put across these, together with, of course, other things that need to be done. But in my opinion, if you ask me, Anne, health comes first. Because if you're not healthy, then tomorrow you might not be there, right? And if you're not there, who do we have? Okay, so in my opinion, I think a healthy nation will eventually lead to a wealthy nation. Yes.
So in short, there's room for everything, including thyroid doesn't take away from diabetes and the rest, right?
Well, I believe there is room to prioritize, right? But we can only prioritize when we know what we are prioritizing for.
Right.
And this is the reason why we need data.
And I know you mentioned that, Mark, you also deal with a lot of things, and not only in regards to health
Thyroid, yes.
and thyroid, but you have a global presence in diagnostics. We are talking about diagnosis for thyroid being a challenge as it stands. But the question that I would want to, the thing that I would want to understand this morning is that, are there any technological advances that you're making as an organization to make this a bit easier when you're talking about the test kits, the THS, T3 and T4? Are there something that you're doing as an organization in terms of technological advancements to make this a bit easier to operate?
Okay, and so Mark, as an organization, we do have 3 arms. We have an arm that deals with electronic devices. The liquid crystal on your phone, chances are this is from Mark. But this is not
this?
The liquid crystal on your phone. Chances are this is from Mark. We also have a life science division, so which deals with industrial chemicals. But that's not what I'm representing here. What I'm representing is the healthcare division. And mainly what we deal with is pharmaceutical products, which we call drugs, right? And we do have medication for type 2 diabetes mellitus. We do have drugs for cancer. and to be more specific, colorectal cancer, head and neck. We do have medication for thyroidism, which is under what we call endocrinology. We also have solutions for assisted reproductive therapy, which is fertility. We have in vitro fertilization center or IVF centers of, people that would want to be parents, but they're not able to get children, and so they get assisted reproductive therapy. We do have solutions for that. So from a pharmaceutical perspective, yes, we are an international organization, on many therapeutic areas. When it comes to technology and diagnostic devices, what we are doing is to partner with other organizations that have the solutions, right? For example, we do have an organization called Hilgen that is dealing with the diagnostic machines for TSH, T3, T4, and we are partnering with them so that they don't sell the machine, they place the machine, and where the machine is placed, that institution only buys the reagents, which makes it easier because now you don't have to come up with the capital to buy the equipment. All you buy is the test kits, right? And we've also asked them to be able to subsidize the cost so that they can have it from the $10 to the $5. So, look, we may not be able to bring everything, but when we partner with other like-minded people, the digital devices companies, with the policymakers in the government, with other private institutions, with the social entrepreneurs in the mashinani, then we come up with a solution. Yes.
John, what is your call to action this morning? We'll be talking about thyroid and why it's important that we give it attention in the country as of 2025.
Yes.
Then what will be your call to action this morning for everybody who is watching, stakeholders, people who are yet to be tested with thyroid and those living in thyroid as well?
Look, I think my call to action is we need to create the momentum on this conversation about thyroidism. This is the first step, awareness. You cannot deal with something that you do not know. You need to know about it. We need to have a conversation about it. We don't have all the data, as I said, especially local data. So we need to have conversations and we need to continue creating awareness. As I said, we have 8 million people population in sub-Saharan Africa. We've only touched 12 million. This is a small number. We need to touch a bigger number of people. This is number one. Number two is we need to work with other partners to be able to upskill the healthcare professionals from the community health worker all the way up to the specialists and the subspecialists. So they need to be upskilled. And then number three, we need to create avenues for testing at affordable costs, from upper echelons all the way to the bottom of the pyramid. People need to have access to testing. So this is what I would.
All right. Thank you so much for making time for us to have this very important conversation this morning. We do appreciate you for your time. That is John Deity, General Manager, Kenya and Nigeria at Merck, speaking to us about the silent threat of thyroid disorders in the country and what needs to be done to make this disease a lesser challenge in the country. That brings us to the end of this conversation. You're watching Morning Cafe. My name is Anne Odida. Good morning.